So today we're automating bank statement reconciliation using Airtable, Make.com, and a couple of other services. But it's a very fun little project. It's gonna save you a ton of time, so let's get started. Hey, just a quick note. We're trying to reach 3,000 subscribers by the end of this year, so it would really help us out if you could please subscribe to the channel now, and don't forget to ring that bell icon so that you don't miss any future uploads. Thank you so much for helping us out. Now, let's get back to the video. So we're going to start things off with a demo. Now, bank statement reconciliation doesn't start at the bank statement. It actually starts at the expense recording, right? So technically, during the month, you're going to be getting expenses. So as you can see, I've already added one expense here. And behind the scenes, there's a little bit of AI that extrapolates the data from this particular expense and pulls in the description. Now, let's just add one more so that you can see how this works. I'm going to drop in my expense, upload my file, and a few seconds later, you'll see how this expense with all the key data from it, essentially the supplier details and the total, will be printed over here. So it's starting up now, and after a few seconds, it will print this over there. Now, while that is working, I'm going to explain how this whole thing works. So skip ahead if you want. But now, as you can see, it's processing, and after a few seconds, we should get our result. And this is a valid result, right? This is what these two PDFs have inside of them. So let's begin with processing our statement. I already uploaded my statement. It's got a ton of different transactions. Yeah, it's all very well and good. Process statement. After a few seconds, you'll see how it'll start processing over here. And we should get our key data over here at the top. Now, mind you, this is not like a roll-up. This is literally printing the values that it finds. And now it's starting to process transactions. And here's the cool thing about this whole setup. Every single transaction on that statement gets parsed inside of our bank statement transactions. And if it finds a pre-existing expense that matches one of the transactions on the statement, it will immediately link it like so. Now, I want to give you another example here. This time, I'm going to upload another expense, but this one shares the same number, 61853, but it's from a different supplier. So I want to see how the system matches the rows correctly. So here we go. And you'll see how the numbers match, but it's from a different supplier. Therefore, when I'm processing the statement, technically the system should skip this wrong expense, match only these two, skip this one, and just keep adding transactions that, well, we don't have an expense for. We need to get in touch with the people who did those expenses and ask them to give us the receipts, right? So it's starting up again, and after a few seconds, we should have our results. And as you can see, supplier Office Max, 61853, 61853, but this one is from Expert Advisors. Let's run this whole thing one more time, and I'm gonna clear these results that we had from earlier and process statement, and let's see what happens. It should find these two, skip this one, because technically this expense is not on the statement. That should be it. Let's see how it works. All right, match the first one, match the second one, should skip this one, and should start creating new rows. Perfect. Now, let's take a look at how the database works. As you can see, there's not much going on in terms of the database. I just have a table for my statements where I just upload my statements. There is a name for the statement, which is interesting because actually the system provides the name. In other words, once this gets parsed, this statement gets parsed, and I'm bringing in these, like number of credits and all of that, technically I'm also creating the name for that statement as per a convention that I set. So that's also kind of handy. From there, I have my obvious attachment field for my statement upload. I have my trigger, just a checkbox, just like we usually do. My related field to transactions, a processing status field, which basically is a long text field, nothing really crazy. Total number of credits, debits, just number fields, and starting balance, ending balance, which are just currency fields, essentially a glorified number field. Now, in terms of bank statement transactions, I have a name, which is kind of empty right now. I should probably put something in there. But at the end of the day, all I really need is a link back to the statement. I have an interesting little field called missing statement. And the reason why I have this formula here is to make sure that I have an easy time later on getting a list of transactions, or rather getting a list of expenses that haven't been matched yet, for which we have an attachment and we have a description. So yeah, I just need a quick anchor to just create a quick list, and you'll see how this works later down in the video. But yeah, technically this formula is for that. Then we have our expense attachment field. We have also a description field, which is a long text field where I'm throwing in the description that I fetch from ChatGPT. Then we have transaction type, title, amount, AI matched. All of these are text fields. And over here, this is just for my sanity. I'm just printing yes and the record ID. You don't really need this, but maybe further down the line, somebody might. So yeah, having said all of that, let's take a look at how the automation is set up for this whole thing, because that's really where all the magic is. There's no magic, but it's just automation. Now, before we jump into Make, we actually need to set up Docparser. That's the first thing that you need to do. Now, if you haven't set up Docparser in the past before, just go to docparser.com and sign up. Once you are in and you've created your first parser, as you can see, I've already uploaded some documents, but in your case, you need to first create some parsing rules. And the parsing rule is very simple, it's very easy. Jump into parsing rules and add a parsing rule. Select text fixed position. You'll need to have some kind of sample document. If you haven't got any sample documents, it will invite you to upload a sample document over here. And yeah, all you have to do is just like highlight it like so, the whole page, go to the very bottom. Yep, that's basically it. Make sure that it takes up all that space where we might have some kind of data. So I'm just gonna make it something like that. Looks good enough to me, I think. And just a little bit shorter. There we go. And don't forget to use for following pages and press confirm. Of course, don't forget to give it some kind of name. That's basically it. Once you press confirm, you should be golden. I'm gonna exit the rules editor because I already have my fixed text. I don't need parse text, to be honest. Fixed text is completely fine. So yeah, once you've done that, you are now ready to roll. We're gonna touch base back with Docparser, but for now, let's jump into Make and build the first out of the 3 automations that you'll need for this. All right, so first automation. It's the one that actually pulls data from your expenses. It's the one that we did over here where you submit an expense and it actually brings in the description from that expense in a very nice, tidy manner. You know, the invoice, the supplier, and the date of the document. So very easy. We begin as we usually do with a webhook. Now, if you're not familiar with Make, maybe go ahead and watch some other videos, but if you have seen the channel before, you know that we like to trigger things the same way every single freaking time. So webhook is the beginning. Make sure that you copy this address to clipboard, and then let's create a quick little automation in Airtable, which is this one over here. And the conditions for it are in table bank statement transaction. When expense attachment is not empty and description is empty, trigger this script. Make sure that you replace this webhook with your webhook. And of course, don't forget to add the input variables like so. Once you're finished, press finish editing. Don't forget to turn on the automation, and that's it in terms of the trigger. Now, in terms of the Make automation itself, as soon as the trigger hits, we fetch that record just by performing a get record inside of the table bank statement transactions based on the record ID that we get from module number 1. Then we update that same record with a little bit of text to say, hey, starting up, something's happening, user, things are moving. Then we perform a split PDF using Zero Code Kit's split PDF module. Essentially, we want to split this PDF because we are going to be using ChatGPT's AI vision later down the line, and this thing only likes JPEGs or PNGs, pictures basically. It's not compatible with PDFs just yet. So we need to split our PDF because maybe the expense that we're working with might have more than one page. So if it does, we need to split it. We need to then convert it into from a PDF to a JPEG. I'm using Cloud convert a file. This is my setup. And then I'm just aggregating all of that to the target structure of OpenAI, where it needs an image URL, and I'm mapping in my temporary URL from Cloud convert inside of this aggregator. Now, once that's finished, I'm updating the user once more, and I'm basically saying, hey, AI processing, and I'm also printing the description from before so that there's like continuity. In other words, if you open up the description, you'll see starting up, done, and then the actual data. So you see how long it took and you understand the process basically as a user. From there, the next step is to map our array number 8 back into ChatGPT, and I'm giving it a very simple prompt. Your response in desired formatting, your mission given the provided data, extract the details, and do not add any conversational language. Using GPT 4.0, temperature 0.2. That's it. Once I'm ready, I basically print all of that data back into my statement transaction, back into my expense, so to speak, with the result being over here, then basically printing done, and again fetching the description from module 11. That's it, nothing else. That's the first part. Now let's jump and see how we can process the actual statement and how the matching works. All right, so it's time for part 2, and part 2 is basically dealing with the bank reconciliation file itself, or rather the bank statement file itself. So we start off the process with the same exact way like we did part 1. We need a trigger, and the trigger in our case right now is the fact that I want to basically process this statement. Of course, you need to upload it first, clearly. And yeah, press process statement, and the automation is set up exactly the same way as we did before. When a record matches conditions, process statement is checked. Run a script. It's the same script as this one, but of course, don't forget to change the webhook and to map the input variables like we did before. So yeah, we fetch the webhook from our part 2 automation, this one, and yeah, just make sure that it's all in here, finish editing, turn it on, and that takes care of your trigger, basically sending data from Airtable to Make. Now, moving on, we have a few modules here, super simple, nothing crazy. First of all, we get that record, we get that statement record based on the values that come from module 1. Then we update that statement record with just starting up. We're basically letting the user know that, hey dude, something's happening. Then we iterate through our statement upload field, essentially this one, and then we fetch that URL from here. We perform an HTTP get a file, and then we basically push that data that we gather from module 39 back into Docparser. Make sure to select the right parser. Make sure that it's set to file get HTTP. The remote ID is a unique license plate, so to speak, for this particular document, and it's comprised of 2 things. Number 1, the ID of the record itself, the statement record itself, the Airtable record ID, basically. Double pipe symbol, and then the execution ID, because I want it to be unique, right? And when it hits Docparser, I want that combination of these 2 things to be unique. Now, as soon as you do that and you trigger your process, your document will land in here in Docparser. Now, it's time to take a look at what happens from here onwards. And that is, how do we send data, parse data from Docparser to Airtable? So now that our data is safe and sound inside of Docparser, and as you can see here, we have parsed, it has performed that function of actually extrapolating the data from that statement, we need to send it somewhere. And in fact, we need to send it back to Make so that ChatGPT can do its thing, and when it's finished, to actually push it back to Airtable. So for that, we need to first and foremost create a part 3 automation and fetch the webhook. Now, contrary to how we've been doing this so far, we're gonna fetch that webhook and we're gonna put it inside of Docparser. So you have to go into integrations. I've already created mine, but if you're doing this, if you're following along, press add integrations, scroll to the very bottom, and then custom integrations, simple webhook, give it a name, something like that. Target URL, that is the webhook that you've just copied, so paste that in. Verb is post, 1 request per document, and that's it. Save and test. That's what I've done for this integration that I had before, so make sure that you follow the same steps. Now, that basically sends a message to this webhook that, hey, I'm finished working with this document. What do you want to do with it? So as soon as it lands here, I'm then taking that payload, and as you can see here, I've got a bunch of different things that come from Docparser. I want to fetch the remote ID. Basically, data that gets sent by Docparser is kind of not enough. I don't believe it contains all the text. Yeah, it doesn't really contain much, but it gives me the ability to map the remote ID, which is our unique license plate. So I'm using a list parse documents module from Docparser. I'm choosing the correct statement, list by last uploaded, that's fine, and I'm mapping the remote ID. Limit doesn't really need to be there, but yeah, sure, limit 10. You're only gonna get 1 document always. Because I'm a little bit weird, I like to actually put a filter here to make sure that it always exists, bundle order position equal to 1, because I don't want the scenario to progress any further if it's not 100% true that we have a document ready to go. It's not gonna happen, but you never know. So this filter acts like an extra layer of protection. So from there, we have an OpenAI module that basically takes some of that data from the document that we fetch from module number 6, and it transforms it. It basically answers some burning questions that we've got about it. So I'm using GPT 4.0, fixed text is mapped in. Then we have our prompt, super simple. I'm not really even saying anything here. And then I'm fetching the document type with the description. I'm fetching the document date with the description, starting balance, ending balance, number of debits, and number of credits. And also, yeah, total revenue. So this module alone fetches that data from that statement. Now, it's important to note that your statement can look like anything, right? It could be Bank of America statement. It could be any bank, any statement. And I would even dare to say maybe even any language, and it will still fetch that data for us. So yeah, that's the beauty of the system that we're building. Now, from there, I'm getting the statement file from Airtable itself. And how do I do that? I actually get the remote ID from module number 6, and I'm performing a split get function on that remote ID so that I can fetch my record ID. And you're gonna see split get used a lot later down the line in this automation, but yeah, I'm using it here to just get the record ID so that I can get my Airtable statement. Update statement data, and you know where this is going. I'm basically getting my record ID from here. I am then printing all of the results that I got from module 76 over here, OpenAI. The document type gets printed in, the document date. I'm also saying, hey, Mr. User, I'm processing transactions, and I'm also printing the status because I want to create like a log of what has happened to the document so that, oh, it's not here, but yeah, I'm basically creating a little log of movement so that I can see how long it took from starting up to processing transactions to finishing. From there, I'm also mapping credits, debit balance, and ending balance. From there, the next step is to actually deal with the transactions of that statement. And the first step is to actually get a list of transactions. So we begin with yet another prompt. This time is just a create a prompt module. Again, I'm using GPT 4.0. System, you're a savant bookkeeper, accountant. Message content looks something like this. I'm mapping my fixed text from module number 6 from Docparser, and I'm basically giving it the desired formatting like so. And the mission is to basically extrapolate all that data in this formatting. Simple as that. Maximum token 0, temperature 0.2. So we want it to be quite, strict with how it interprets the data. And that's it. There's nothing else. From there, I have two paths. This path over here, and we also have this path over there. Now, this path is very simple. It's the final little step, which basically prints complete on that statement. Super straightforward. It's the last thing that needs to happen. In other words, we want ChatGPT to work through this thing first and then move down to this one final step. Let's analyze what is happening with this particular path, because this is the most interesting thing, right? So let me do a little bit of highlight again. So we have these two sections. Now, I want you to understand that over here in this particular module, I'm iterating through each and every transaction that I fetch from here. Over here in these two modules, I am performing a count of expenses in my system that have not been linked to a statement yet. They are like motherless children. But I need a number. I need a number of motherless children in order for me to proceed. Once I get that number, and I have to do that every single time I'm processing a statement row, because essentially I might be linking a motherless expense to a statement, right? Over here. But then maybe the next row could be mapped as well, and maybe the next row could be mapped as well. You never know. You need to check. So this number of motherless expenses will go down every time that you process a row, or maybe will go down because if you don't match it, it won't. But essentially, this is an exercise in getting the expenses with missing statements. So that's where that missing statement comes into play. So I'm performing a simple search of my bank statement transactions. Missing statement, yes, and it just performs a count. Again, here I'm just taking the IDs, and from here, you see, I'm then creating this router, and my filters are very simple. If the array is not equal to 0, in other words, if there are unlinked expenses, it will go up this route. If there aren't any, in other words, if the length is equal to 0, then we simply create that transaction, right? There's no need for us to even attempt at linking anything because technically we don't have any expenses to link. We just have statement transactions, and that should just be added as a row. Let's talk about this particular path, the one that actually cross-checks a transaction against one of our motherless expenses or orphan expenses. So again, I'm performing another search where I'm getting those transactions with the missing statements, and I'm basically putting them all together in one big text. Separator, new row, group by, nothing to group by. And this is the structure, right? The record ID and the record ID, space, double pipe space, and the description of that transaction. That basically creates a nice little chunk of text of all of those orphan expenses. And then I'm performing another matchmaking AI operation where I'm basically giving it the text to parse. In other words, list of current expenses requiring matching, the bank statement record, right? The row from that bank statement from this iterator over here, 88, this one, right? And my prompt goes something like this: given the list of expenses, please find the match. The parameters, expense processing matches list, a simple yes or no answer, like yes, I found a match, no, I didn't find a match. And then the final parameter over here is matched existing expense record ID. So if it does find a match, what's the record ID of that match? What's the record ID of that expense that we've matched it? And based on the list that we got, the text list, that's the record ID. What is it? Alternatively, just print NA, because if it doesn't find a match, I don't want it to start hallucinating and thinking, oh, I need to provide an ID. No, just print NA if you don't match anything. And that's it. Then we have another split, create a record. If it's not equal to yes, in other words, if it doesn't find a match, just create it, and we're just creating that record. And I'm going to explain how this works in a sec. Alternatively, if it does equal to yes, and the ID does not equal to NA, in other words, yes, we found a match, and here's the ID, then it simply updates that existing expense with some of the details from the bank statement, and it also performs a match back to that statement automatically. So let's talk about that scenario when we actually do find a match. First of all, the record ID, right? The record ID of the transaction, because we're updating that expense that didn't have a statement and now it has. We found that expense in our list of statement transactions. So first of all, I'm getting the ID from here. Next, I am linking the statement back. So I'm doing this from module number 106, which is somewhere over here, update statement data. So from this one, because I have the statement ID here, I want to link that, right? Super important. Then I need to print the transaction type, the title, and the amount. Now you have to understand that over here in this value that gets iterated, the individual transaction, right? We need to perform some split gets on it. So the transaction type, it's somewhere in the beginning, I believe. Yeah, so over here, because it originates from here, I have my transaction type, debit or credit in the beginning. Then I have a space, double pipe space, the entity name, and then the value of that transaction. So I need to basically take that row and I need to take the individual parts from it. And the process is very repetitive in a way. I'm taking the value, split, get the first part, in other words, the type, and then I'm finally performing a replace. So anytime there is a dash, because those transactions actually get a dash in the beginning, so I'm replacing the dash with an empty string. So I'm cleaning it up, so to speak. Then the title, even simpler, split, just get the second part. In other words, the title of the transaction as it's seen on the statement. Finally, the third part, and you can see I'm doing exactly the same thing, split, get the third part, and parse number, because typically those values will have like $signs, they will have some kind of weird funkiness. We want make to basically take the number out of it and print the number. So yeah, parse number, I'm just defining the decimal of that number, and that's that. And finally, AI matched, I'm just basically printing whether or not yes or no it matches the list, which is yes, and then match the expensing record ID. Don't ask me why I'm printing this. It's just from my own kind of like peace of mind that, hey, dude, you know what? Yes, there was a match. It's fine. And that's it. The top part is exactly the same, only that I am creating the record, I'm matching it back to the statement, and the rest of it is exactly the same. I'm not really doing anything different there. And that's it. That's part 3. So that's it from me, guys. Thank you so much for watching this particular video. Hopefully you've enjoyed this particular automation with bank statements and expenses and all of that. If I was a solopreneur, this would be like gold dust to me, because it saves so much time with like manual matching of transactions, and it's so good. So yeah, leave a comment down below if you've enjoyed this particular one, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.